We've lived here 23 years. We've built everything we have here. Built our home and outbuildings and our cabins. Pisgah Mountain LLC has a proposal to put 450-foot wind turbines on the hill right in front of us. And there's nothing between us and where those will be. They'll start 3,000 feet from this cabin and will effectively ruin the use of the cabin.
Maybe whatever cost that we would see, not just dollars and cents, but in terms of the kind of pristine wilderness landscape that we associate with Western Maine, is that now compensated for by the benefits on the global warming front, having energy that is homegrown here in Maine, providing the needs of people who live here in Maine. Wind power is a relatively new technology. It is certainly one of the renewable forms of energy that I think, as I mentioned before, it makes sense to be looking at. Previous governor, Governor John Baldacci, put a high priority on expanding wind power in Maine. And that push coincided with the decline of resources. So sadly and ironically, at a time when the public would have benefited from having expansive, in-depth coverage of this new technology that a governor is pushing, it ended up being an issue that really ended up sort of being covered like a baseball game.
Every single story I write, I try to give both sides because the reader can't make an educated decision without hearing from both sides.
When I read most articles about wind in particular, just because it's the area where I'm most knowledgeable, it seems like the opponents to wind are given an equal voice as the proponents, which I understand that creates sort of the unbiased journalism look. But at the same time, if you take statistical data from SSI actually, and you look at proponents versus opponents of wind energy, land-based or offshore or combined within the state, you see far more proponents. So I feel like local media has a responsibility to cover issues not through the lens of 50-50, but what is accurate for that population.
Wind power it's like I said, there seems to be a lot of support publicly among Mainers for wind power, but there is a pretty vocal minority of folks who are critical of the industry and don't believe that it's a great solution for the state, and then they think that the impacts, the scenic impacts, the placement of the turbines on top of mountaintops, that's not beneficial to the state. So anytime I write an article, a lot of times I do get feedback from groups that are critical. At the same time, I get feedback from the industry too. So it seems to be a pretty hot topic.
I think there's opportunities to do more investigative work into the details of really what's known and not known in the scientific questions, at least from my perspective, rather than going towards, this group says they're against it and this group says they're for it. Steer away from that and more towards topically where are we? What do we know? Where are the ecological questions? And present it a little more evenly rather than sort of polarization, the kind of thing that happens.
I would love to be able to to dive in and really explore the research and spend a lot of time doing it, but unfortunately a lot of times I don't have that time. So sometimes you get articles where you present both sides of an issue. You say this is what the opponents say, or this is what the supporters say, and it's that he said, she said that you often get with political coverage.
Even with Maine being the top producer for wind power in the region at this point, it's still a fairly new industry sector for Maine. It's still something that's just been happening in the last decade, really. And so it makes sense. There's a lot of political reporting around it because a lot of this has got to be hammered out through the legislature, through the governor's office. There's been a lot of policy, a lot of debate at that level, right? This is still where that's at. The other stuff is stuff that's evolving now. You know, the environmental studies, the the technical stuff. You know, and I would imagine that we're going to see probably less political reporting and more, economic reporting, more health reporting, more environmental reporting, that sort of thing, as these are becoming more established in Maine, as the policy framework is set, as the politics part of it ends, essentially.
If we think of it as a conversation, or think of it as a community, there are many perspectives in any community. And I think if you want to get as close to the reality of a situation as you can, you need to seek out more than just the polarized perspectives. And I do have a belief, based on almost 30 years in journalism, that if you do the effort of getting all the perspectives out there that you can, in the end, good decisions get made.
I feel like when it's local press, it's almost like they come into it without doing much background research, so they want us to basically just tell the overall story of the project. I think basic science education is really important. If you're going to be covering science, you need to know about science.
It is a question of resources. Available resources at any newspaper are diminished compared to what they were even 3-4 years ago.
There's a real need for investigative reporting on this, and not just what different groups and individuals are saying.
The way the news business is today, unfortunately, we can't cover every aspect of it, and a lot of times people aren't interested in every aspect. They're more interested in finding out about the project and what the end result is. But I certainly think it's important, as a journalist, to try to present as much of the information as possible for people.
I think for Maine papers, one of the coolest stories that doesn't get touted enough is the fact that it's students doing all of this work. I mean, we have researchers, and yeah, they're guiding what the students are doing, but the students are the ones who are out there breaking blades. The students are the ones who are designing, the tendons for the platforms. The students are the ones writing the talking points and designing the websites and all of this stuff. We just happen to manage their work and kind of push them in the right direction. For local press, that's a huge story because that means you can report on some kid from Portland or Cooper or Machias or Holton or whatever and talk about this really cool thing that this kid did.
There's no question that in-depth coverage of any topic is going to happen more often if you have the resources. And I think that's the problem that many of the newspapers in Maine now face, as the Portland Press-Herald and other newspapers have had to reduce staff because of the economics. Inevitably, certain areas of coverage are going to suffer.
I just have to write my story as straightforward as their side, this is what the city officials decided.
I didn't have any plans to do anything but continue to enjoy my land and do my work here. And now, everything's in upheaval. We don't know what our future is here.